Hello, everybody. It is Thursday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, assistant sports editor for multimedia at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, joined for our weekly Zeise is Right chat by Paul Zeise, our Post-Gazette sports columnist. Paul, we got a lot to talk about. The Steelers are going to be playing their preseason opener. Brandon Aiyuk, trade rumors flying. We're going to break down. We're not going to just talk about the rumors. We're going to talk more about what they could mean for the team, whether a deal gets done or not. Going to talk about the Pirates blowing another big lead against the Padres last night, and then maybe get into a little Sidney Crosby and Pitt football. So, Paul, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I am hanging in there. Before we get started, I just want to thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast, Pella Windows and Doors. There's no better place to get new windows and doors installed in your home than Pella, who can help you save on energy costs year-round. Schedule a free in-home consultation with your local Pella Windows and Doors to find the right product for your home and budget. Give them a call at 866-593-1560 to discuss your project further. That's 866-593-1560 to get started planning on your new windows and doors installation with Pella Windows and Doors of Pittsburgh. All right, Paul, let's get into it with Brandon Aiyuk. As we're recording this, we still don't know whether a trade is happening or not. I've seen the comments on the channel. We're not just going to speculate baselessly about, are they going to do it or are they not? Does it make sense? We've done enough of that conversation, so we're going to kind of maybe do some second level here. And Paul, I guess my question for you is, we talk about this potential move in the context of, what does it mean for the number 2 wide receiver slot? They'd go out and get a number 2. Brandon Aiyuk, is probably a number 1 in his own right. And I think that, begs a question of how did the Steelers see George Pickens, just given the level of interest and engagement they've done with the 49ers? Even if this deal doesn't get done, they've gone far down the path of trying to bring in basically a guy who would have the right to say he's a number 1 receiver. Do you think that should shape the view of the Steelers' confidence in George Pickens at all?
Well, I think it really has nothing to do with Pickens. I think it has everything to do with the fact that they know that they need a second receiver, and whether he's a 1 or a 2. Aiyuk is obviously worlds better than whoever is going to be the 2 for the Steelers. So I don't know. I don't know that it has much to do with Pickens, as it has to do with the fact that the Steelers basically traded away Deontay Johnson and didn't have a plan to replace him. That's really what it comes down to. And so we can talk about a million other things that have gone on between now and then. Between now and when that happened. But it seems increasingly clear that they didn't have a real plan in place to be able to adequately replace Deontay Johnson. And as a result, that's where we're at right now. That's the biggest problem that you got, is that you now are trying to force feed a trade that doesn't seem like it's necessarily going to be easy to make, because you convinced yourself that you had enough on the other side from Pickens to be the second receiver types. And what I mean is the Van Jeffersons and the Kez Watkins and the Calvin Austins and all these other guys. I think it's pretty clear to me the Steelers are sending a very, very clear message that they know they don't have an adequate second receiver. So whether they would view Aiyuk as the top receiver or Pickens as the top receiver, it's not relevant. The fact of the matter is they have to push all those other guys down on the depth chart, and that's what they're trying to do.
I'd actually argue maybe not for this year, Paul, but I think it is relevant for 2025, 2026, because I think we could rapidly find ourselves in a situation here where the Steelers are looking at a situation like the 49ers are facing with Aiyuk and Deebo Samuel, where they've decided they can't keep both. Let's just play things out and say both Pickens and Aiyuk have big years in Pittsburgh. Doesn't that create a situation where, can you keep Pickens? Can you pay both of these guys, especially if you've already signed a deal with Aiyuk in the neighborhood of $30 million, and let's say Pickens thinks he can demand something close to that 25, and then all of a sudden you're talking about investing $55 million in 2 receivers in an Arthur Smith offense that I don't know really warrants that.
Well, I guess down the road it would mean something. Obviously, if you have Aiyuk, signed for 4 years, are you really going to sign Pickens for 2 of those 4 years? You'd be paying an incredible amount of money to 2 receivers. The flip side of it is, I think one of the things I like the most about the Steelers is they make moves for this year. They worry about next year. And they sign these deals that people said, no way they're going to be able to get that under the salary cap. And somehow, some way, in February, all of a sudden they have all these restructured contracts and everything fits under the contract. I mean, they are really, the opposite of the Pirates, who are so concerned about 2027. They've let 2024 slip away. But the Steelers don't do things that way. They would be signing Brandon Aiyuk or bringing in Brandon Aiyuk because they look at their team this year. They say we have one glaring weakness, and that's at receiver. Let's go get a receiver and see if we can put it, see if we can win, and then we'll worry about, how much it's going to cost us later.
Yeah, I think that's certainly a fair argument. I just look at I found this interesting in doing the research for the show. Aiyuk's yardage totals by year were 748, 826, 1,015, and then 1,342 last season. I think he had 8 touchdowns in 2022, and then in 2023 he had 7. So obviously making plays there as well. I mean, that sounds pretty George Pickens to me. Do you think Pickens still has that kind of upside where, he's capable of putting up a yardage total? I think it's more a question of, can he do it in an Arthur Smith offense with a Brandon Aiyuk across from him? Probably not, but can he be that level of reliable receiver for big plays, even if the raw totals aren't there? On average, is he going to put up some big numbers like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's going to be very interesting. I think Brandon Aiyuk might be a classic example of a guy who's in the exact perfect system for his talent or his skill set. And that's the thing that will worry me about the Steelers bringing him in, is I don't know that he's a guy that is going to fit quite as well in what Arthur Smith is going to ask him to do as he does in that offense that he's playing in now, which we can all agree is just a really, really, really friendly offense for offensive skill position players, especially receivers. So to me, I think Aiyuk's numbers have been, every year gone up. And I think that, part of it's been a reflection of the fact that he's gotten better as he's gotten it, he's grown up a little bit. Part of it has been, that the last couple of years, Deebo Samuel's had some injuries. So, it's obviously helped Aiyuk's numbers. But in terms of translating to the Steelers, I am not sure it's really going to be similar, just because the offense is going to be so much different for him, and what they would ask him to do in Pittsburgh is different than what they're asking him to do in San Francisco. So I would almost say that if they were going to get one of the two, Deebo Samuels fits a little bit more because of some of the things he does beyond just catching the football. But, I think he'll be fine because he's a good player.
Paul, I just want to get into what this could mean for some other guys too. For context, Over the Cap has the Steelers with $78 million in salary cap space for next season. A lot of you have mentioned that in the comments for some of the videos we've done on Aiyuk, is that they have some money to spend next offseason. But if you take $30 million off the table for Aiyuk, that leaves them with $48 million. You got to pay a quarterback. You got to potentially pay Pat Freiermuth. Some people are still very hopeful you're going to pay Najee Harris. There's the whole Cam Heyward situation still hanging over that. So if they make a trade for Brandon Aiyuk, someone that Steelers fans love is probably not going to be here next season, and maybe two someones, right, Paul?
Well, I would say it'd probably be Freiermuth and Najee Harris would be the two most logical ones. You need Cam Heyward because you haven't done a good job of replacing him, and you need a quarterback. So, Najee Harris would be the easy one because you've got a really cheap player in Jaylen Warren for one more year. I would say that would be where you would start. But the other part of it is, even in an offense like Arthur Smith's, I mean, Pat Freiermuth is a good player, but he's kind of a luxury item in some ways. And I think you can duplicate what he does by drafting a guy or by bringing in another guy. So those would be the two that I would tell you probably, if they have to make some tough choices, those would be the two that I would think would probably be the ones that would go away. Cam Heyward, to me, I I think they'll figure something out with him because, again, I don't know that they've adequately replaced him. And I think if he proves this year again that he could still play at a reasonably high level, I think they're going to do everything in their power to sign him maybe to a 2-year deal or something. So I think he'll be around. And the quarterback situation is interesting. I wrote about this actually the other day. It's interesting from this standpoint. If Justin Fields starts and is really good, they're going to have to pay him. Well, a guy in his age, and if he's a top half quarterback, which if he's not, they're not going to, they wouldn't want to pay him. So let's assume if he starts and he's in the top half of quarterbacks, a guy of his profile and his skill set and his age, the minimum wage for those guys is $40 million, period. I know Steeler fans think that they'll get him for 20 or 15 or 20. No, they won't. The going rate for those guys is $40 million, and he's a free agent, straight free agent. So, he can go shop himself around and someone will pay him that because that's what the going rate is. The top 16 quarterbacks in the league make $40 million or more. If Russell Wilson's the starter and he plays really well and they want to sign him to a 2-year deal, okay, his deal probably going to look something like Baker Mayfield's, who makes $34 million a year, which means the price of the Steeler quarterback position, which this year is about $6 million, is going way up. So you're right. You add Aiyuk and you add the quarterback. I mean, now you might have to make a few tough choices but by the same token, if both of these quarterbacks stink, then you're probably looking at going back to the scrap heap and trying to find a free agent quarterback who's available, that you might be able to get away with 12 to 15 million, but how good is that guy going to be? Or a rookie, how good is that guy going to be?
Yeah, I think 80 million in salary cap space sounds like a lot, but if you give 30 million of it to one guy, it rapidly, dwindles. I guess to your point though, Paul, even if you think you can replace Pat Freiermuth and Najee Harris, doesn't it feel a little discordant given how much we've talked about? Oh man, Najee Harris could be the next Derrick Henry in that Tennessee offense, or Arthur Smith is highlighting the tight end so much in camp, and if we see all of that work out, then all of a sudden you're in a position where you can't keep the guys who've made that offense work, right? I think that's the part that I struggle with most, is not necessarily the idea that could you replace Freiermuth? Sure. Could you replace Najee Harris? Sure. It just seems like these moves were so based around those guys to bring in Arthur Smith in the first place.
Well, I mean, I agree, but like I said, I think those are positions that, I think it's easier to find replacements for players at those positions than maybe some of the other positions. And I think that's, the other part of it is with running backs, it's always a case of you kind of feel like, okay, with running backs, we have the ability to run their wheels off, so to speak, get them to a point where they're at the end of their career or whatever you want to say. And then guess what? Now, all of a sudden, we're talking about going back and getting another younger version of that guy who's younger and cheaper, who doesn't have all those miles on his legs. So I think that's really what it comes down to with Najee Harris is at the end of this year, you look at what his age is, how many carries he's had, and whether or not you think that he's got, 2, 3, 4 more years of production left. And most teams are basically now saying, no, after the first, contract, we're willing to move on. And I think, the greatest example of that is Saquon Barkley. Here's a guy who was basically the most important player on offense. And the Giants made the decision, we're not going to pay him $12 million a year because it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. We can find a cheaper guy that roughly duplicates what he does, and we're in a better spot.
Yeah, going to be interesting to see. This is Adam Bittner, Paul Zeise on the Weekly Zeise is Right show. We're going to move into some Buccos conversation here. Paul, it was ugly last night. David Bednar gives up the lead. Colin Holderman comes in extra innings and gives up 3 runs to more or less take them out of it, even though they made a rally there at the end. Listen, I kind of look at this as, those are your guys. Those are the people that you built the bullpen around. Nights like last night are going to happen over the course of a 162 game season. So I'm not necessarily losing I know a lot of people are. I know a lot of people are freaking out about Holderman, bringing him in. I think people are freaking out about Bednar. His ERA is over 5, below's a save. Listen, there's valid concern about those guys, but those are the guys you're riding with no matter what. I think what we're seeing here is are the Pirates living in the world on why you don't punt in June and July when you know you've got a decent team, but the offense is not good enough? Because I look at a game like last night, and if you had a couple more wins in the bank, Paul, I don't think you're super worried about what happened in that game. I think we're in a situation now where it feels like they're falling out of it, maybe sooner than they should have, given that they made some moves at the deadline that people feel good about. They've gotten some production, especially from IKF. But they just seem to set themselves so far back by letting this offense struggle for 2 months before addressing it.
Well, yes, there's a couple things at play. First of all, watching the Padres and the Diamondbacks, you realize how much better the lineups are than the Pirates. I mean, it's not even close. It's not about the guys in the top 4 positions, because I think realistically, McCutchen gets on base pretty, he's still got enough pop. He gets on base. Reynolds, is obviously one of the better hitters in the entire league. O'Neal Cruz, for whatever he is, whatever you want to think about him, he strikes out too much, but guess what? He also hits the ball mile. He's good on the bases. Rowdy Tellez has been, he's been fine. It's not about those guys. To me, the black hole the Pirates have in the second or bottom half of their lineup, you can't keep covering that up. And I said this way back when they were getting incredible starting pitching and they were still 500 or a game or 2 under 500. It's like, that is absolutely a dereliction of duty. Okay. I said this yesterday. G1 Bay seems like a nice guy. He's got lots of energy. Yay. He runs. He's fast. Good. He's useless as a baseball player other than the fact that he runs fast. Okay. He cannot hit. Keep Brian Hayes. If it's his back, put him on the DL and let's go. Let's move on. But I mean, this guy is obviously, there's something wrong with him. He can't hit right now. He's almost an automatic out. And when he does get a hit, it's a single. Okay. 0 power. You look at the fact that they still run guys like Grandal out there, who's useless. Connor Joe, you know what? He's great in April. We've seen that. After April, he's Connor Joe. Okay. They just have too many guys that aren't good enough, period. And they run them out there every day. Michael A. Taylor had that 4 or 5 days where, he looked like he was going to turn into the center fielder of the future. And then he turned back into Michael A. Taylor. I mean, they've got so many guys on this team. And even with the trades, Brian, what's his name? De La Cruz. I mean, he's come here and basically been worse than the guys he was supposed to replace. I just think that the lineup has too much to overcome in order to be able to consistently win, regardless of how well you pitch. Because the other part of it, Adam, is we all knew in April and May and even into June, eventually the pitching was going to start springing the leaks and come back a little bit and regress back to probably a more realistic area or level than what they were pitching at, where, it looked like they had, it looked like they had 5 Cy Young Award winners going out there every night. You knew it was going to come back. You knew Colin Hotterman was going to come back a little bit. You knew Bednar might not ever be right this entire year because he started it off with a muscle injury, which those things for a closer can be a real problem. The bottom line is, you knew the pitching was going to come back to earth a little bit. So you needed to make the lineup better in June. And you needed to make sure that in July, when you were, 2 games over and still really, in the thick of things, you needed to make sure that you went out and were aggressive and did some things at the trade deadline to win this year. But again, the Pirates, we just talked about the Steelers. The Pirates are different. The Pirates are celebrating because they've got De La Cruz and what's his name? Kiner Falefa. And what's the guy they got from the Red Sox? York. They got those three guys for the next 3 years. So they won. Yeah, but the bottom line is they didn't do enough this year. So it's a frustrating thing. It really is a frustrating thing to watch. So I just feel like whenever it comes down to this kind of thing, it bothers me because I feel like we are spinning our wheels saying the same exact thing we said for the last 2.5 months.
Yeah, and you're just seeing the results of it. Getting back to your point about the Diamondbacks and Padres just clearly visually being better than the Pirates. How many times have we sat and listened to the broadcast and Joe Block does his Diamondbacks made it in with 84, almost won the World Series with 84 wins. Maybe the Pirates can win 84 wins and slip in. And it feels like the team is being managed that way, Paul. There's like they don't necessarily care to win 90 games if they can. It's like, what's the bare minimum we can do to get 84 wins and then get Paul Skeens into the playoffs? That just like we're seeing why that's to me so dumb. It's like, yes, are there years where you can slip in to the playoffs, especially with the expanded wild card if you're like an 82, 83, 84, 85 win team? Yes. But that shouldn't be the goal. And that's what my biggest frustration is. It feels like that is the goal. Well, if we win 84 games, that's great. Like that we spend a small amount of money and win 84 games. Anything can happen from that point. And I've just heard specifically Joe Block say it too many times to not be frustrated with it.
Well, and again, the other part of it is a pipe dream to think that this offense could win in the playoffs against really good pitching. Because I keep, we keep focusing on, well, if you get to the playoffs, look at you got, Skeens and Keller and Jones. You can. That's true. But the more I watch this offense, the more I realize that they're going to be going against the other team's best pitchers 3 days. The other team's best 3 pitchers. This offense is not good enough. I just don't think it's good enough to realistically believe you're going to make some sort of run like the Diamondbacks did last year. The Diamondbacks could hit. They can hit. The Diamondbacks and the Padres, if you look at their lineups, I mean, last night the Padres had one guy in there that was batting like 180, but for the most part, they're out. All those guys can hit. The Padres and the Diamondbacks, all those guys from top to bottom, for the most part, can hit. They don't string together 3 guys that are, batting less than 200, which are, essentially 3 outs in a row. And so the other thing is they play the game a lot smarter than the Pirates do. Their hitters move runners up. They take extra bases. They run the bases the right way. They are aggressive but smart. Both teams are not even afraid every so often, if it warrants it, to bunt a guy over because they know that the guys in their lineup behind them can handle the bat well enough that if you get a guy to second, you might be able to, they're probably going to be able to bring him in. I mean, they capitalize, and that's really what it comes down to. They not only have better hitters, they play the game of baseball better than the Pirates do.
Quickly, because I want to get to some Pitt and Penguins here before I let you go. How horrifying is it to think of this offense without Andrew McCutchen? And are we finding ourselves in a situation where it's hard to imagine him not being in this lineup next year if he wants to be in it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was saying that last night watching the game. He obviously can't run anymore and can't play the field, but his bat is still reasonably good in this lineup. I mean, it's almost like you have the MVP level, that he was 10 years ago or whatever. So yeah, I think they're gonna have to sign him to another year if he wants to play.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about, because I think we went into this season thinking, this should be probably it for Kutch if things go the way they're supposed to go. They have not gone the way they're supposed to go, and so yeah, it's hard for me to imagine them moving on from him at this point. Paul, what do you make of this Sidney Crosby situation? Today's August 8th. It's past the magical, superstitious, day that everyone thought he was going to sign the deal because it's his birthday of August 7th. All of Penguins media seems to be trying to soothe everyone and kind of like, pat them on the head and say everything's going to be fine. The deal will get done. But do you think he'd let like a deadline like this pass? Even if it's kind of crazy, say a guy's birthday is a contract negotiation point. But even just the concept of getting this far into August without a deal getting done, do you think there's any world in which he's seriously contemplating his future?
I mean, I do think he's at least contemplating his future. I don't think he's contemplating playing somewhere else. I think he might be contemplating what does he want his next contract to look like. Does he want to make it a 4-year deal? Does he want to make it a 2 or 3 year deal? I think he's just basically trying to figure out what his next steps look like. I don't think there's anything to it. I mean, I think he's going to play, a couple more years and he'll play with the Penguins. But at his age, I mean, he's going to be 40. Believe it or not, he's no longer Sid the Kid. He's going to be 40 not that long from now. So, I think when you look at it like that, he's under contract for this year. A 2-year extension means he's playing until he's 40. So I think that there's, some of that's really he's being thoughtful about what he's going to do and how he's going to do it and what he wants the rest of his career to look like. I mean, I just don't think it's a priority for him to go fast because I think he knows what he's doing. Now, the fact that the flip side of it is the fact that you hear reports that the Penguins are waiting to figure out what they're doing with him before they can make any other moves. It would behoove him to figure this out, but he's Sidney Crosby. I think he's earned the right to take his time and figure out what he wants to do.
Yeah, I just find the soothing. I find it so interesting. I can't really remember a instance of don't worry, everyone, it's going to get done.
I wonder if they're soothing themselves.
It's possible, Paul. I just wanted to ask you quickly about the Pitt QB battle as well. Everyone's saying the right things about Nate Yarnell down there. It's Nate Yarnell. But I don't think Eli Holstein came up here to sit on the bench either. And I think there's a lot of people who are excited about him as well. How do you see that playing out, as we get deeper into Pitt camp here and closer to the season?
Well, it feels like Nate Yarnell is probably going to be the guy that starts the season. And, for what you ever, think about Nate Yarnell, because sometimes if you're the guy that's been here for a while and you've been passed over a few times and, you've played a little bit, but for the most part, sometimes people just sort of poo-poo you as, well, if they have to start him, he's not good enough. What's concerning to me, Adam, it should be concerning to you and everybody else. They went out and made this big splash move, their 4-1-2 alliance, to go bring in this Eli Holstein guy. Now, to be fair, he is a redshirt freshman. So he does have 3 years after this. But as we've seen, Adam, college football has become the ultimate year by year. I mean, he could be gone next year. He could not like what he sees and go somewhere else next year. But my point is, we've gone through all of spring practice, all of the drills that they do in the summer, all of the, winter workouts, and 2 weeks of training camp, and he still hasn't beaten out Nate Yarnell. That should be the concerning thing, is that how good is this kid? Just because he's from Alabama, how good is he? So I think that Nate Yarnell is probably, at this point in camp now, he's probably entrenched himself as sort of the guy that's going to start the season as the starter. Could that change? Absolutely. It might change. The other part of that is it would be far more understandable if Frank Cignetti was still around. because then you would say, well, Nate Yarnell's been in that system for 3 or 4 years. Of course, he's way ahead of this guy. They brought in a brand new offensive coordinator. You know what I mean? Who not only is a brand new offensive coordinator, they're going to be running a completely different offense that's nothing close to what they did last year, which means the Holstein kid and Yarnell started the season, started out in the exact same place. That's what's concerning to me, is that why has this kid not been able to beat out Nate Yarnell? I think Nate Yarnell has done a good job when he's played. I think he's fine, but you don't go make a big splash move for a guy who's going to be a backup.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting how in Pittsburgh we don't seem to be able to get past this. Like, well, this guy's the number one, but there are many people who don't feel good about that. And there's, Justin Fields. Last year with the whole Phil Dracovic situation, it just feels like we're living Groundhog Day with these QB situations where, Nate Yarnell is the guy and everyone's saying the right things, but there's just widespread belief that maybe he's not. But I think that's a good point to you, Paul, is that there's a lot we're not seeing, and maybe this is a different situation. We're going to leave it there, though, Paul. Thanks for joining me today. We're going to be back tomorrow, so you only have to wait one day to see me and Paul back here on the Post-Gazette Sports Now YouTube channel. We're going to be doing a Steelers post-game show, reacting to the Steelers' first preseason game. We'll start, about 10, 15 minutes after the game and go until we run out of topics to talk about. If it's not that interesting, who knows how long it's going to last. But at least we'll have a lot of Justin Fields to react to tomorrow. So make sure you're subscribed. If you like this video, please hit the like button for us. Help us out in the YouTube algorithm. We always appreciate that. Also, stay tuned. Christopher Carter is going to be back with the North Shore Drive with a lot more Steelers talk on Friday. Paul, good luck with your radio show today, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.
All right. Thanks, man. We'll see you soon.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.